All right, Michael, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Michael Mancke. I work here at the Plantation Resort on Crystal River in lovely Crystal River, Florida. We're located about an hour, 15, 20 minutes north of Tampa, about an hour and 45 from Orlando. We're on the nature coast of Florida. I've been in the hospitality business. Oh my goodness, if it wasn't for Delta Airlines, I wouldn't be here because my mom worked for Delta and she met my dad, and here I am. So I feel like I've been in the hospitality business forever. We even owned a mom and pop hotel back in the late 70s in Daytona Beach, although I didn't know I was going to be in the hotel business back then. Worked around the state of Florida with a number of hotel groups and also with Aramark Parks and Resorts for a while nationwide, and held a number of positions from director of sales and marketing, general manager, national travel industry sales manager with different companies. So also worked in the media world for a while with a group called Miles Partnership.
Yeah, I saw that.
Where we did the Visit Florida program. So worked with a lot of what they call the DMOs, destination marketing organizations around the state and other areas of the United States as well. So enough about me.
Awesome. I actually think my mother actually took part in the Visit Florida because we went in 2003 and did a week in Orlando and went down to Tampa as well, down to the Busch Gardens, the typical like get the family abroad for Christmas and for New Year's. So I spent my time down there. Part of that campaign, I'd say. I suppose like diving right in then, and that's very, very helpful context, Michael. What do you think are the three biggest roadblocks or challenges facing the hospitality space that you see?
Biggest roadblocks, that's always a great question. And there's biggest ones, who knows? I think they change and morph over time. Of course, the number one thing we all have to have, buildings, yes, we have to have resorts, we have to have properties, but they're just empty buildings without people. So getting people, qualified people, trained people, motivated people, people that want to actually do a job.
Yeah.
And us to have a resource capable of providing them the guidance they need once they want to do the job. And of course, then it builds back to the other, obviously that loop of employee relations, ownership and guest is all important. We got to find the guests. We got to have owners that are willing to resource the product as well, which I don't know if that's, it depends on where you're at, if it's a challenge or not. Right now, we're blessed to not have that challenge. We have somewhat of a good small workforce. It's challenging because of where we're located. We are just outside of all the major metropolitan areas. We're sort of in what we like to call original Florida, which is not old because it's what it is, but we're not next door to Disney or Mickey or Shamu or any of the attractions. We have our own wonderful little attractions, which is Mother Nature, which again, going back to the original Florida concept, but there's not as many folks in the work pool to draw from. The investor group, our ownership groups bought us, keeps us funded, keeps us going. So that's great. And then we try to make our guests as happy as they possibly can be, which then creates the cycle.
It's interesting as well that you mentioned just there, the first thing is just roadblock is getting people and training people in particular. What kind of challenges do you run into there? Is it the pool is small where you are, or is it just the quality of the people that you're looking to bring in? Is it like a post-COVID thing? Or
it's a little of both. We're unique in a lot of ways, and I've worked all over the state of Florida alone. I've been in Daytona, Miami, Palm Beach, Fort Myers, Tampa Bay area. In this area, I'd say 80% of our new employees have never worked in the hospitality business before.
Oh, wow.
Where prior to that in Tampa, Orlando, Miami, you were always drawing from a pool of people that worked at another resort, another hotel, another restaurant to draw from. So it's unique in that respect. It's nice, it's fresh, but that gives us an added burden for training. And with a smaller property, we're not the mega resorts. We have somewhat of a very efficiently scheduled crew. So when do you not have them working to train them? And so it's kind of like a unique balance between on the job and finding the right time to give them enough so they can be on the job.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you see, and if you say 80% of them have never really worked in hospitality, presumably that's a younger workforce as well then, that have kind of that gap of COVID are now coming into the workforce that they've never like when they could have been teenagers, been doing hospitality jobs and then coming and graduating into a role with you. Is that kind of what you're kind of getting on there?
It's not really, because I mean, I'll tell you, when I got here 12 years ago, and we still have to this day, I've got employees that are 23 years, 40 years on the job. Guess how many hotels they've worked at in 40 years? One. This one.
Yeah.
So it's a great area to live and raise families and stay. So there's, with the exception of a little few limited service properties in the area, there's not really any employee sharing or stealing or whatever you want to call it amongst each other. So we're like, again, in the Tampa market, the Orlando market, the Miami market, everybody that applies that's been in this before, 90% of them have done the hospitality business before.
Yeah.
So even regardless of age or post-COVID, pre-COVID, when I walked in the door here 12 years ago, the great guy that worked for me, been here almost 12 years. He was only, like young still, and he'd never worked at a hotel anywhere, never even stayed at a hotel outside of North Nation. So it's just unique in this particular little niche of the area, because we're just far enough away from all the city centers that most people are not going to travel 2 hours for a hourly job.
Yeah. So like where you are, you guys are not seeing like a kind of absorption of talent, the kind of larger cities like Orlando, like that, where you live are typically within the market for you, and you're not really seeing much sort of competitive sort of quote unquote like conquesting, people pilfering, kind of taking your employees, that kind of thing. In that case, then when it comes to like sort of like retention, it seems like, across the board, like I feel like the conversation, like I've been here in London for like 18 months, and my background wasn't in recruitment or hourly workers or restaurant hospitality or anything. It was just like marketing and whatever the challenge may be, go do the challenge. And so one of the things I definitely noticed when I started was like everybody was talking about like ghosting and interviewing and sourcing of candidates. When I started was like, early 2022. So we're talking about at the back end of the sort of COVID. So obviously restaurants, hospitality were like all trying to catch up. And now that sort of conversation has moved into retention and quality. It's like, okay, we're past this sort of hiring, like sort of blowout. And now it's like, we actually need to hire for quality. We need to hire, like we need to figure out retention. Do you, when it comes to like retention, for example, given the location you're in and what you're just saying there, where it's like, you don't, like you people who've been there for a long, long time, do you guys have like sort of, or do you personally like have a sort of retention strategy that you use with your employees? Are there like, benefits or perks or any of that kind of stuff? Or is it like, how do you manage people, like the turnover and the churn of these hourly workers that you have?
Well, absolutely. We're one of the few employers and smaller employers in town. We're big for this town, but small compared to who you've been talking to, I'm sure. We do offer benefits. We have a competitive wage. We do, again, benefits, which is great. A lot of other companies here, even the restaurant and hospitality, don't really offer that option. So that's our primary strategy, so that we can have and feel like they're part of the family. We try to train them as the best we can, and listen to them and all those fun things you do, which is just the right thing to do with people, And we're such a small community. I would dare say, I don't know, like the mayor of the city right now started out being a busboy here. It's everybody that's in town has had someone work here or worked here at some point, and they've made their own progression or evolution into another industry. Or a lot of people do leave the area after a while for going back. Florida, you may or may not know, but most everybody here is from somewhere else, and a lot of times they go back there just because mom's not missing them and mom wants to go back, or you want to be with your friends and family. So it's a challenge there too sometimes to retain people.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, man. I mean, I actually think you're one of the more unique people that I've listened to, in the sense that you have less of a challenge around this. Like, I feel like, especially, I mean, I guess like given the size of the town and the kind of the way of how kind of unique the hotel is and where you're based, like the other like hotels I've been speaking to have had like a very serious problems with like sort of employee retention. And I guess like people bring up to me all the time, like DoorDash and like Amazon, that people will go work in, like they've lost what they would have been the people that they have now, like kind of more working in fulfillment centers and doing sort of more flexible sort of like work schedules with like a DoorDash or an Uber Eats. I mean, God bless the people for doing that, but like, you know, like not the same as like clearly having like, you know, a good place to work and you know, having sort of benefit that you obviously don't get with Uber Eats or whichever, you know. But I guess like that's kind of like where a lot of the hotel managers sit to me. And then also just like a lot of people have spoken to me about like quality and this is it's so hard to train people up into kind of more senior manager kind of positions within hotels. Do you see like problems like with that at all?
To a degree here as well, because we don't have a lot of turnover at the higher level management. We hadn't up until recently.
Yep.
And because there's not a whole lot of other, if you want to live in the area, you're not going to find a director of rooms job down the street.
Yeah.
Maybe the Holiday Inn may want a general manager at some point, but I would dare say we'd be as competitive and a lot more exciting to work for than a Holiday Inn. So
yeah.
which then, you know, your up and comers, they would have to, you know, wait for someone or move departments, or which we've had some of that. We've had some lateral moves across from, we have at the resort here, we offer a full marina experience where we swim with manatees as one of our primary attractions. You literally get in the water with a wetsuit on and interact with a 1,500-pound mammal in the water in their lifestyle. And
awesome.
so we had the marina.
Have you done that? Are you a big manatee swimmer yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. We actually encourage the employees to take that trip for a week. We pay for it for them to do so they can experience what it is we have to offer. And we have a golf course as well. So we have golf options.
Yeah, I saw that.
Housekeeping. We have a nice food and beverage operation and banquets and meetings. So within the department, within the property, we have some lateral opportunities, but I've been here 12 years, so if you were waiting for my job, you're waiting a while. If you were wanting to be being a general manager, which some days I'd love to give it to them, but
yeah, no, that's class. Are they like pelicans or what are they that were on the way? Because I was on the Instagram as well, and I was looking at some of the photos. There was like a giant pelican or like I'm not even sure what it was. Looks like is it a pelican?
We have pelicans here as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, we're considered to be the nature coast of Florida, where we haven't yet concreted over everything. And
oh god, that's a great way of putting it. I mean, she's like mad for road. I mean, there's like I went to Florida the last time I was there. Before I worked in marketing, I worked in like a kind of like design capacity and worked with Disney on the parks. And I went down and they were like, you can kind of stay here and kind of rent a car and you can stay in a hotel. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go visit all the other places. And I remember driving down to like Tampa and I was like, whoa, it's like the whole, even Orlando in itself felt like just one giant freeway that you kind of exit out of to go to different things. And so, I mean, I love that you're very much stressing the fact that like, no, we are like the opposite of that. Like you can see green and lushness and manatees and everything else under the sun.
And maybe put it into perspective, we have 2 chain restaurants in the whole city.
Okay. So it is.
You have an Applebee's and a Chili's. Other than that, you're going to Oysters or Crackers or the Crab Plant or Seafood Cellar or the Freezer.
I gotta say the happy hour Chili's. I mean, as a blow into this country, I have to say I do love the happy hour Chili's.
We're not wall to wall, as I'm sure you experienced. We don't have every. When I got here 12 years ago, there was the excitement was they opened up a Dunkin' Donuts and with a Baskin Robbins attached to it.
To be fair, I also love donuts. There's no Dunkin' in San Francisco, so I think I've bought Dunkin' about 5 times in my life. But my colleague's sitting over here with a Dunkin' iced coffee right now, drinking away. So like, they're all about it.
And I say all that, and people ask me a lot of times, well, what's it like in Crystal River? And I said, well, if you're sitting in Tampa, for example, you ever wondered what Tampa might have looked like 100 years ago?
Yeah.
It's kind of like we are, but we do still have Wi-Fi, though. Let's not lose the fact that we are.
Great Wi-Fi. I've been on calls with people that have had the worst Wi-Fi. And I think the very first podcast we did, I was like, you know what? Just put it online. We gotta like back ourselves to deliver a number of podcasts. Like we've never done this before. And the first one had such bad audio. I was like, oh my God, this is just like embarrassing. But we've gotten better every time at like knowing how to prepare for them, like making them better, that kind of thing. But like your Wi-Fi is great. I will stress you that. I guess because I know we're like coming up on time as well. I mean, one of the things I'd love to ask you is like, how do you see the job market like in hospitality, from like hourly workers all the way up to like, you're saying that you've some like a leadership turnover, less turnover in hourly. So I'm curious your take on the job market.
I'm definitely seeing a lot more people wanting jobs recently, which is great. I think we've gotten into an era where the employee might have a little more of a leg up on the market than they had a few years ago, for whatever that means, or whatever that, they a lot of great people that sometimes I wonder, do they know what it means to work?
That's the second time you said that, by the way. So what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
If you want to be the greatest chef in the world, you better start off being the greatest burger flipper first. And if you don't want to be a great burger flipper, then maybe you don't want to be a great chef either. So it just seems like the work ethic is not as dedicated, and God bless them. I mean, maybe you shouldn't dedicate your life to a job, but it does seem to be challenging with where I came from and when I came from, and I'm old, so I know, back when I walked 10 miles up a hill in the snow for a penny, and all that. But there does seem to be a little more, which is great in some ways. It makes us have to make sure the employees are taken care of and trained properly and given the resources they need to make their job as easy as it can be. But then they need to start stepping up sometimes too. And I'm not sure I'm seeing the step up since COVID.
Is that in general to like all employees, or is that like a Gen Z versus everyone else?
No, I saw that in your email, and I would say that I think it was fueled by the younger generation, but I think it's been quickly adopted by the older generation.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, like you think you'd be looking up to them for like the advice and the kind of motivation and like showing it how it's done, but it's the other way. Yeah.
So and again, it's not terrible, and I think you find, I don't know what the statistics are. I'd love to know the statistics, but out of how many ex-employees are you going to find that shining star?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think we could probably dig something like that out in ours. At least from a restaurant perspective, we definitely could probably figure what that is. Like, how many of our clients would say that of all the employees we've sent them, how many of them stars? Because again, that's actually a very interesting question. I mean, and that's something that I hear across the board. This is not just like a hotel thing. It's like all across hospitality. It's like, is the work ethic kind of there? What it was? Do people realize what it takes to do it? And like, what does it take to get those kinds of employees, and patience for the hiring, patience for the training, being willing to pay the salary. I mean, it's interesting because like Amazon have just kind of come in and just offered, especially in the urban areas, and they're offering people like college tuition. You can work with headphones all day. You don't have to talk to him who's 2 boxes, and you can get paid $20-something an hour, which is
hard to compete against.
How do like the hospitality kind of space kind of compete against that, which then begets like more problems for hiring for quality if like there's only another pool of people that exist purely to work in hospitality. But like, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, and I guess you're not alone in that opinion. This is something, that's why I asked that Gen Z versus everybody else question, because I feel people kind of hint at it, and it's like, I'm always curious about how people articulate it, in the sense of like, I'm not blaming Gen Z, but they've certainly come into the market and they're not used to, or they're not as prepared as other generations were coming into work in hospitality, for sure.
This may interest you. I don't know if I should even say it or not, but I had a gentleman I was talking to that was in the survey world of wage survey and position and stuff. And he made a comment to me. He goes, the country runs well on about a 5% unemployment rate. And he said that because about 5% of our world out there may not be folks that you would even want to work for you.
Yeah.
So anytime the unemployment rate drops below 5%, we've got that percentage of employees that probably are not very productive in the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, what are we at now? 3% or something? It's like the lowest it's ever been in the history of the country, which is kind of bananas, even though like
that would only be 2% in that formula. And again, that varies obviously drastically between regions, areas, states, and professions.
I think it's kind of a very, I think it's a good point in the sense that like, were there more, it put more pressure on employees to want to preserve their job. It's as if like, sometimes people can think that these jobs are kind of disposable or that they can move from job to job. And I definitely think with COVID, there was a rampant sort of like, move here, just depending on the offer with like zero loyalty. But then I think the universe is happening, like you were talking about earlier, which is like retention. Like if they're good, you can keep them,
Right.
and if you treat them well, you offer them good perks, benefits, flexible schedules, all that kind of jazz. Like there comes a time when people stop moving. And I think that's kind of happened now, where I think that sort of, or at least anecdotally, I would say for me, I mean, obviously, like from what I hear, but like my understanding is like we're seeing less of the sort of like the ball's more in the employer's court now than was in the employee's court, which was definitely the post-COVID, where it's like get the bodies. And now we've moved into quality and retention, which obviously means then that we're like, you don't want to take the first person that walks in your door just because they're warm, which has happened to a lot of businesses. Which is interesting, I think, I suppose for you, and then one other question, and last question, because I mean, we're at time, so like we can obviously stop, because I mean, I'm enjoying this conversation.
This happens. I think you talk too much. I should get paid by the word.
Yeah, you should be a writer then. It's like, when you see like emerging trends, because we've just been talking about like, post-COVID, like, and the type of workforce that's coming in and sort of like the behaviors of people, like what kind of trends are you seeing across the board anyway, like in the hotel, for example, like in terms of like the way your hotel is like practicing like very different hours, different schedules, different technologies, that kind of thing. Like, is there anything that you're seeing that like, is interesting or making you mad?
Not making me mad. No, it's a good question. I think it goes back to some of my challenges with employees as well, as we're so insulated that we don't necessarily follow the trends or the fads of the industry. I mean, Mother Nature's never going to go out of vogue, if you will, but it has its cycles of when more people are wanting to do that versus the urban experience of even the New Yorks and the Chicagos and Atlantas and Vegases, and then traveling European opening back up. I think our trend in Florida might be a little bit slowed down because of a little bit of Florida fatigue when we were open and the rest of the country wasn't, and now they're tired of us.
Oh yeah.
And now that the rest of the world's open, there's more Alaska cruises I heard of in the last few months. There's more European trips. There's more just girlfriend getaways to Atlanta, where before they were kind of relegated to staying really close to home from Florida travelers or people coming.
Yeah.
They weren't going other places either because of the restrictions and the concerns they might have had. And I think it's the concerns have waned, and the trend is that people are going to go back to that. Where else can I go now? I've heard the term from some of the educators in Florida fatigue. People are like, okay, done that, been that 3-4 years. Now let's find something else to do. Of course, we'll always have our mainstay folks that come every year and do everything, but it's obviously where you make your extra revenues and you make your extra guests happy is when you find that guy that's the first timer or second timer family that's never done that before. So I think the trend for the next few months, and what does that mean? Months meaning years, and not to overplay it either, but every year the travel industry gets a little sluggish when we have a presidential election. Everybody's waiting to see what's going on and who's going to be in power and whether I should spend my money or not. So between that and some economy issues, Florida fatigue, I think Florida's in for a little bit of a downturn, although they'll still be the loyal supporters moving forward. Major trend wise, I don't know what the next great is going to be. So don't know. Obviously, you can look into Orlando market, and that's sluggish as well with the Disney products that are courting people now, and usually they just open the doors and get more than they want. So I would love to have insight on what they're thinking, because
I think they're regretting overcharging all the families that go there and create a PR prop for themselves, I'd say.
Well, one of the things in that study I was listening to from the university, it was a Florida Atlantic. He was saying that they don't use the word gouge, but they do definitely think that Florida has taken the opportunity for raising rates and prices to a level that they don't necessarily appreciate now, the consumer, looking back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess like my last exposure was Miami, and I guess like Miami is just expensive no matter what. So like I'm just so used to being ripped off. Having been in San Francisco and now New York, I'm like, everywhere I go. I actually went down to North Carolina 2 weeks ago, and I went for lunch and with my missus, and it was like $100 nearly. And I was like, this is like scandalous. Like, for like a lunch and a drink. And I'm like, that $50 a head. I'm like, it's in North Carolina, like Charleston, not Charleston, Charlotte rather.
Charlotte.
But yeah, so Mike, these are the questions.